Hey, how's it going? So we're going to be talking about specifically how to start a task, how to focus on a task, and how to finish that task. So let's go ahead and talk about that right after this intro. How you doing? How's it going? So before we get started, I'm Dr. LeGrand, if you're new here, and we're going to be talking about how to actually finish a task, how to start a task, especially those tasks that are just, you just don't want to get started because it's just too big of a project and you just don't want to do it at all. So I'm going to talk about some principles and some tactics that you can implement to be able to do that. But before we get started, if you do actually struggle with ADHD and have a hard time with that, I do a free downloadable guide for both adults with ADHD as well as parents who have kids with ADHD. Basically, it talks about the labs that you should be running, the supplements and nutrients and foods that you should be implementing and avoiding. Has all in that guide, so you can download that in the description below. Now, let's talk about the difficulty when it comes to focusing and actually focusing on a specific task. So the problem with this, when you are trying to focus on something, it might be something that you just don't want to do. It's something I actually just learned from my own actual personal coach, is looking at Parkinsons Law. So if you're not familiar with Parkinsons Law, it's basically the idea is the more time you give something, that time will be filled up. So for example, if you decide to give yourself a task or project and it really would only take you one day, but you're like, well, I have a week, to do it. So you fill up that space of doing whatever to try to finish that project. But if you give yourself a time limited time saying, okay, I'm going to do this in 4 hours. I can do it in 4 hours. And you give your time restraint. In Parkinsons Law theory, you already have the capacity to be able to finish it in that time frame. So the more time you give it, you're going to fill that time up with whatever distractions that come throughout that time frame, versus if you give it a more restricted time frame, your brain capacity could also finish that project. Now, obviously, you can't go unrealistic, trying to finish like a big, huge paper assignment in 5 minutes. Okay. But it has to be a little bit more realistic. So try to figure out, okay, how long does this really take? Or can I shorten it a little bit because I think I could do it in this time frame? And write it down. Write it down in that time frame saying, okay, yes, I can actually finish this. Now, the second part of this is, how do you start a project that you don't want to have to do? One of the best tactics that I've seen and that I use for myself, anytime I don't want to go do a project, or let's take even, for example, you don't want to go exercise or go running. The thing is, you got to tell yourself, okay, let's just go walk for 2 minutes, or let's go jog for 2 minutes, or let's just figure out the title of my paper. That's it. That's all I'm going to do, just for 2 minutes. The trick of this, what it does, it tricks your brain, it tricks you to be able to actually finish the entire project. Because if you could tell yourself, just for 2 minutes, I'm going to write down the title. Or in 2 minutes, I'm going to just break it down into smaller steps and just tell yourself you're just going to do that. Because what happens is when you start it, you're already in the process, like warming up, right? It's the same thing if you were to go jog. If you're like, okay, I'm just going to go jog for 2 minutes. Well, are you really going to just jog for 2 minutes? By the time you've already gotten your pants on, the shoes on, and you're going and you're jogging for 2 minutes, you're going to go for 5, 10, 30 minutes, right? So it's the same idea with projects, is just tell yourself you're just going to write the title or whatever project you have, you're just going to do that first step. So I want you to break it down into steps, and that can really help you really start getting started with projects, especially for people who have a hard time focusing, or concentrating, and they're struggling in their business to be able to know how to finish these tasks. Those are things and steps you could do. Or if you are somebody who has ADHD and are struggling with this, if you're a college student, or if you are, a parent that has a kid that has this, tell them these types of different tactics and strategies that you can implement to be able not only start a project, but also finish it by giving it more of a time constraint. So I hope you guys found this beneficial using these tactics. Just remember about the Parkinsons Law theory, and also to be able to get started on a project, just break it down in bite sizes of like 2 minutes. And then that will help you finish the rest of the project because you're already started on that, okay? So this is Dr. LeGrand, and if you're looking for any further guidance as far as if you do have ADHD, I have a free downloadable guide basically goes all over the labs that you should be running, as well as supplements, nutrients, and also foods that you should be implementing if you have ADHD. And also if you're a parent who has a kid with ADHD, has that download guide in the description below. So until next time, this is Dr. Legrand. And remember, you have an optimal mind. Thanks. Bye.